Thanks very much for joining me today. Quite a few familiar names in the list today. Oh, g'day, Damien. How's it going, mate? And thanks everybody else who's joined us today. Now, for those who haven't met me before, I'm Tom. I work with the client engagement team here at aXcelerate. And today I'm going to be hosting our refresher training session on report building. Now, this is session 11 of 13. We do have 2 more sessions left. We'll be talking about them at the conclusion of today's session. But report building. Now, we're going to start off today with a very general overview of what report building is in aXcelerate. I'm going to be running you through the process of saving these reports so that they can be accessed later. I'm going to show you some example reports that we have set up. And then we're going to have a look at some made up on the spot reports. And the examples I'm going to use are we're going to make some class, unit of competency, workshops, e-learning and certificate register related reports. So we can look at enrollment details, assessment details, so on and so forth. And at the conclusion of the session, I'm going to briefly be talking about using reports in workflow. Now, I won't be talking about workflow as a whole. It will just be some important information regarding workflows that utilize reports. So to get started, I'm going to jump into our aXcelerate account. And I will mention as well, I'm monitoring the chat today. So if anyone has any questions, please, by all means, pop a message in the chat. I won't be reading them out as we go, but at the conclusion of the session, we will have a Q&A where I can look at those. So just bear with me while I admit some people to the room, and let's jump into aXcelerate. So we're going to be looking at the reports tab up here today, and we're going to start off on the report builder. Now, if you're not too familiar with what this is or what can be achieved, this might seem a little bit daunting at first. But the reason there's so much information on the screen is because there's really so many different ways we can run reports and even run reports on specific areas of the system. So we're going to be looking at some very basic reports today to give you a good understanding of how this feature can really be utilized to the fullest potential. Now, before we continue, I very quickly want to mention, let's just say that we wanted to run a report to look at all of our class enrollments. To do that, we need to either select live or warehoused. Now, the difference between them is fairly important. A live report will be, as the name suggests, a live report. All the information up to the millisecond that you've clicked that live button will be captured. The downside to that is because it needs to read all the information in your account, they can take a little bit longer to generate. Now, that's not a problem for simple reports, but if you're running a massive database query, you don't want to be doing that with a live report because it will take a long time to process that request. A warehoused report looks at your data as of yesterday. So if you wanted to run a big report, I recommend using warehoused because it uses a cached database to obtain the data, and it is a lot faster to process the request. So while it doesn't massively matter which one you use, it's important to understand the differences because some reports are better utilized with current information, such as assessment submissions, and some reports are better off with warehoused, such as yearly enrollment information. Now, before we have a look at running one of these reports, I'm going to hover over the reports tab here, and we're going to look at saved reports. Now, these are reports that have been run previously in the system, and we've pressed the save button. What that means is we can rerun these without needing to enter all the parameters again. So for example, hopefully, yep, you guys can still see me. Awesome. For example, let's have a look at the completed units this year report. Now, this was made back in 2019 by Wes. However, the way he set up this report means that it can be continuously utilized. You'll notice that again, although this is 2019, when I click run, you'll notice that it's using the current year's information. So I'm going to click on run by clicking the little play button here. So I didn't need to re-enter any of these parameters. It's just doing a report search as per what Wes put in the system in 2019. Now, because he's qualifying and looking at the activity end date for units of competency, he's chosen current year, meaning that even though he set this in 2019, when we run it this year, it's still going to be the current year. In this situation, 2021. So you can even use you can set up reports that get utilized in the future, and you don't need to worry about going in there and amending dates, because if set up correctly, that all automatically happens. Let's go back and have another look at this report. Now, just bear with me while I move my camera around. We're going to have a look at saved reports here. I might even move this down the bottom for a moment. Now, this is an example of a workflow report. Now, again, we're going to be discussing this a little bit more later on, but saved reports can be utilized in workflow. That won't be applicable for everybody in the session today, so I don't want to spend too long on that. But just to show you, again, this is a report that automatically runs and emails students if their assessment is 2 days overdue. And you'll see this as well was set up in 2019. But if we run this, the way Wes set it up originally is rather than looking at dates, we've given it a time frame. And that time frame is always as per today. So every time this report gets run, it's looking for submissions from 2 days ago. Now, to make a bit more sense of what we've looked at, let's create a report from scratch. I'm going to create a class report here. I can probably move my camera back up to the top. There we go. Let's make a class enrollment report, actually. And what we're going to be doing is running a report to see the number of enrollments in our classes across the system. It's just a general report that I want to run just to understand how many students we're processing or are still in aXcelerate. Class enrollments report. Now I'm going to run a live report because I want to see enrollments up to and including today. So let's run with that. Now what we're looking at here are the filters, and we can add and remove filters as required. What they let you do is qualify the information that you want to appear on the screen. For example, domains aren't applicable for me, so I'm going to remove this by clicking the minus button. I don't really care about which trainer we're going to be looking at. I just want to look at all trainers and all enrollments, excuse me. So let's remove this. If there was a particular qualification that we wanted to include, so for example, if I type in the good old Cert 4 and Work Health and Safety example, if I ran this report right now without touching anything else, aXcelerate is going to be looking at all class enrollments, but it's only going to be displaying enrollments part of the Cert 4 in Work Health and Safety. I could toggle this to be excluding. So now it's showing every qualification except the Work Health and Safety. But look, I actually want it to show every single enrollment. So I'm going to remove this filter because I don't care what qualification it is. Enrollment status. Now, I don't want to see students that have been cancelled or are tentative. So I'm going to change this to excluding. Then I'm going to select some options. I'm going to choose tentative. I'll do deferred as well, suspended, and cancelled. The alternative is let's remove these and say we only want to include completed or in progress students. Now I'm going to click on submit. Oh, actually, I forgot to mention before I click that button, we're looking for the current month. Of course, you can change it to be current year, previous year, anything you'd like. I'm just doing the default this month example. So every single thing we're seeing on the screen here, there's only 13 enrollments because this is a demonstration account. But we're now seeing every single enrollment that happened this month in our demonstration account. Now, let's just say we wanted to see additional information. We can actually add or remove columns from this report as required. to make more sense of that, I'm going to click on back. You'll notice that by clicking back, it still remembers all of these parameters I've entered. But this button at the top here, display fields, each of these display fields was a column in that report. So let's just say we didn't want to see the student's organization, simply remove it. If we then rerun that report, organization won't be in that column. But let's say that we wanted to include, what's a good example? What if we can do a trainer? Here we go. I'm going to say trainer given name and trainer, might help if I can spell when I'm live in front of everybody. Trainer surname, there we go. Oh, look at that, it's already in there. So trainer full name was an option. Just to show you what I'm doing, I'm just going to remove trainer full name. So I've made it so that we're seeing the trainer's given name in one column and surname in another column. We can, using the field I just removed, show the trainer's full name. Just to show you the functionality though, I'm going to remove full name and have them in separate columns. Let's click done. Let's click submit. And the trainer given name, I'll move myself out of the way. Trainer given name and trainer surname can now be seen in the report. Now, before we navigate away and have a look at another example, I quickly want to bring to your attention a couple of buttons on this page. We can click save. And what that's going to do is save it in our saved reports. So I'm going to call this class enrollments example because I'm really creative with my naming. Sharing internally simply means that other administrators in our organization can view and run these reports. If it's just for me, click no, it's just for me. But this is for everybody. I'm going to submit. And here we go. We're now in our saved reports. So again, reports, saved reports. And we can now see class enrollments example. So if I wanted to see that information again, rather than going back into the report builder and reconstructing that report with all the custom filters and display fields, simply click run. It remembers the parameters that we've entered. Click on submit. And it's also remembered the display fields that we've entered. So saving reports is incredibly useful if they're things that you regularly look at. For example, we have some clients that look at assessment dates. Assessments are being received, and they can run a report to see if there's any assessments that are yet to be marked. And using that report's information, they can contact the trainers appropriately to say, hey, this assessment needs to be marked. Again, that's just one of the multitude of examples. Now, we can actually export these reports as a CSV or Excel format simply by hovering over the button here and clicking Excel or CSV. Now, you can export it as a PDF. Just depends on how you guys want to do it. Now, let's go, actually taking me back there isn't where I want to go. I want to go into the report builder. We've had a look at a report for a class. I'm going to scroll down. Let's have a report for units of competency. So instead of the previous report, which was I wanted to see all of our class enrollments from the current month, if we wanted to drill into that further, we could have a look at the unit of competency enrollments. Now, this is going to show us, this report here, if I, for example, am enrolled in a qualification that has 10 units of competency, I'm going to appear 10 times in this report because it's showing us our unit of competency enrollments, not our class enrollments. So let's run this report. Again, I'm going to use live because I want to see all of the current information for an enrollment report. And just like we did earlier, I'm going to make it very all-encompassing. I'm going to remove the domain, qualification, and trainer. I do want the competency outcome code available because we don't want to include students who have withdrawn. So for example, let's exclude students who are, if I can remember, withdrawn formally, WA, that's not what I want. Here we go, 40, withdrawn, discontinued. We could, if we wanted, to go in and add additional ones. These filters here are WA specific. Some are New South Wales, so I'm not going to be continuing in this example. I just want to show the NCEVA standard. So we're running a unit of competency enrollment report for the current month. So anyone who's been enrolled in a unit this month, or sorry, let me rephrase that. Anyone who is currently enrolled into a unit this month, but we're excluding anybody who has withdrawn. If we wanted additional display fields, those columns to appear, we can add so in here. And look, just as an example, I'm going to include the full qualification name so we can see which qualification these enrollments relate to. I'm going to click done and I'm going to submit this report. Now, this is going to take a little bit longer to load than our class report because it's looking at a lot more information. And again, because we've run a live report, it does sometimes take a bit longer to load. So here we go. Look at all these Oscar Weber and Rick Astley enrollments. It's almost like I've been doing refresher training sessions and have been enrolling people as an example. So for example, Oscar Weber was enrolled in this qualification, and you can see the name here. We can see the unit of competency that he's enrolled into and the status for that corresponding unit, as well as dates. We could go and reorder these columns. We could remove the trainer information. We could remove the organization and USI information. Let's actually do that. I'm going to click back. I'm going to click on display fields, and I'm going to remove the USI and organization. We're going to run this, re-click submit, and it's that same report. Again, we do just have to give it a moment to load, and you'll notice that USI and organization are now excluded. When this report runs, here we go. So we can see we've got 58 entries. Again, this is just a demonstration account. In practice, this would be a much larger report. I'm going to save this. This one is just for me, and it's our unit of competency enrollments. I'm going to call it current month. Let's submit that. Cool. How easy is this, guys? We've just made one report that looks at all of our class enrollments, one report that's looked at all of our unit of competency enrollments. There we go. I was looking for it to highlight it, as that's the one. What's another example? I'm going to do, look, let's do the workshop one. We might as well stick with the agenda I showed you guys at the start. Workshops next. Now, we could run a report that looked at every single workshop we have created. So running the workshop report would just look at all of our workshops, and depending on what we enter, it could show us all of our future workshops, all of our past workshops, all of our workshops of a particular type. We could use a workshop bookings report to actually look at the number of people and this corresponding information who have booked into workshops. Now, I'm not going to use a workshop booking report because these refresher training sessions are actually set up as workshops in aXcelerate, and I don't want to show anyone's private information on the stream. So I'm just going to run a general workshops report. And look, I'm going to make this one a warehouse report just to show you that really it's the same thing. Now, coordination type, we can choose if it's an in-house or a public workshop. Look, I'm not concerned with that. Let's just close it. What I do want to know, though, is how many workshops of the refresher training series we have. So I'm going to type in refresher. You know what? I'm not in the account that makes our aXcelerate refresher courses, which probably makes a bit more sense. I'm in our demo account. I'm not going to add the workshop type. I'm not going to add the domain. Look, let's just make this a very standard report because I actually don't know how many workshops we have in this account. I'm going to make it current year. So what I'm doing here, just purely because I'm intrigued, we're going to be running a report to look at how many workshops we have set up in this demonstration account that was set up this year, but they can't be cancelled. They have to be active. Let's submit. Now, look, it could say there's nothing. Here we go. So there's 42 workshops that we've made in this demonstration account this year. And let's say we wanted to learn more about this specific workshop. We can again see the dates are here, so you can tell these are all different workshops. But if I wanted to learn more about this specific one, I can just click on the name, and in a new tab, it opens that workshop. pretty straightforward. And again, just like we looked at with the class and unit reports, you can cull down or add information using the display fields and further customize these through filters. Again, what I'm showing you guys today is fairly basic use of the reporting feature, just to get you, typical information. You can really drill down and get into specifics with this feature. I can't think of an example off the top of my head, but, again, I worked in support for 6 months and I've worked with a multitude of clients who get very, very specific with their reporting, which is great to see because it's such a powerful feature. One thing I do want to show you guys is this e-learning column here. Now, we won't spend too long on this section, but what we could do is if you use, for example, SCORM packages in your aXcelerate account, and you wanted to see how many people were still enrolled in SCORM packages, you could have a look at e-learning enrollments. I'm going to run a warehoused report. Now, this is very likely going to come up with no information because we don't use SCORM packages in this demonstration account. But for example, you could look at specific activities. So I think we have one called example. Let me just see if this actually works. I'm waiting with bated breath, guys. I'm live in front of everyone. Yeah, here we go. I didn't think it would. So pretty much, let me come back. E-learning enrollments, activity ID. What's the field I'm looking for? SCORM package version. No, that's not the one. It would be activity name. Here we go. Yeah, so look, this probably isn't the best example just simply because we don't have e-learning set up in this account. My apologies, guys. But essentially, you could say, look, if we've got a first aid SCORM package, you could type in the name of the first aid SCORM package there. You could have a look at the date it was created, or if you don't want that information, you can just remove it. You can qualify it further to say, look, the student has to be completed, student has to be enrolled, student has to be cancelled. And so what a lot of people use this report for is they might run a SCORM completions report to see anyone who is still in progress for the previous year. Because if they're still in progress for last year, that's probably a data entry error and needs to be amended. So the use of reports can be used to not only qualify current information in the account, but can be used to view historical enrollments. Like another example is if you run a class enrollments report for 2014 and you find someone who's still in progress, very likely that you're going to have to go through and update that information unless they have been genuinely studying that course since 2014. Now, going back, I want to show you scrolling down here. This one's more so for our Turbo clients. It's the online assessments report or the enrollments or attempts report. Now, I won't be drilling into these. I do want to mention, though, that live reports aren't available for online assessment reports. They do have to be warehoused. Now, the reason for that is they're very, I suppose, query heavy, for lack of a better term, on the database. So we do opt for it to be warehoused only. Now, as an example, actually, I'm going to go back into our saved reports because I want to show you guys one of those example ones we looked at earlier. This one here. So this is that workflow report for overdue assessments by 2 days. I'm going to rerun this and let's have a look. So this is an assessment submissions report. And what we're saying is if the student is enrolled or in progress and the assessment due date was 2 days ago, we want this student to appear in the report. Now, again, when I submit, it's not going to show any data because we don't have anyone in this account that has passed their due date. But again, reports can be used to look at outstanding assessments. They can look at students who need to upload an assessment, trainers who need to mark an assessment. There's, again, we could sit here for 5 hours and we just sort of list off things that are available in the report builder. Unfortunately, I'm not that smart though. So it would take someone much smarter than me to drill down and tell you every single thing that's possible because it is such a large, and powerful feature. Let me look at my list. Oh, one thing I do want to show you guys, there's a report called a certificate register report. I think if we scroll, this is the one right here. So in the contacts report, certificate register. Now, this report, a lot of our clients use it when they get audited by ASQA. And what it does is it allows you to show all of the reports that you've ever issued from your aXcelerate account. It shows the corresponding certificate number, and of course, you can qualify it to be between particular dates. Now, because we're not issuing genuine certificates from this account, running this report would show no results. But I do quickly want to show you the parameters and filters available. If we wanted to search for a specific certificate, we can, but we don't want to do that for this example. I want to look at every certificate we've issued in the current year, and it has to be for full qualifications. I don't want to see any statement of attainments. Let's actually submit this. I'm curious to see if it comes up with anything. Oh, look at that. I forgot that I issued certificates in one of these refresher sessions. So reports, they're already helpful. They're already jogging my memory. So we can see the certificate number, dates they've been issued. Yes, this was a full qualification. This is the qualification. Here's the code. Here's the student. And again, you can click on the student's name if you want to learn more. This is the certificate right there. Now, that's almost everything that I wanted to discuss today. But the last thing that I'll mention is workflow reports. Now, again, this is only going to be applicable for a few people in the call. It's for the automation of sending out correspondence to students through workflow. So if you're not familiar with the phrase I just said, you don't have to pay attention to this next bit. If you are, listen up because it's really helpful. Now, this is again, using the same example, a report that is utilized by workflows. When we're utilizing a workflow report, essentially what the workflow, the automation wants to do is when a student is 2 days overdue on their assessment, aXcelerate is going to automatically email that individual student to say, hey, your assessment is overdue. Now, I'm going to run this report because in order to do that, there is a display field that we need to enter. And I'm going to submit this report to show you. Now, actually, I mean, yeah, if I qualify it further, it's not going to show us any data because, again, we don't have any overdue assessments in our account. But contact ID, this field here has to be entered if you're using reports for workflow correspondence. The reason being, the workflow engine looks at the contact ID when figuring out who to send an email to. So it will look at a row, for example, and go, oh, this contact, contact 6179807 has an outstanding assessment. I'm going to go to that contact's profile, send them an email. It doesn't match off name because if there's duplicates, it gets very confusing. It matches off contact ID. And again, to add that in there, we simply go to display fields, type in contact ID, and of course it's already entered, so I can't re-enter it. Now, guys, that's actually about everything. We flew through this one, and it's 2:30 right on time. So guys, in summary, I have described the report builder in aXcelerate and given you some examples of what data can be obtained. I've explained saved reports, how to save reports, and why we recommend saving reports. We've had a look at example reports, both some that are already saved in the account and some that I created. Ones that we created involved classes, units of competency, workshops, e-learning and assessments, and the certificate register. And we briefly spent a bit of time looking at workflow reports. Again, that is a much more advanced feature, but I did want to mention it for those who it is applicable for, and that we need to utilize the contact ID display field when corresponding to those individual students. So our next session, which is the second last, is going to be on resource management, which is essentially the uploading of documents to aXcelerate that can be provided to students. That's going to be on the 3rd of August, next Tuesday, and again is going to be our second last session. So guys, as always, thank you very much for joining me today. I hope this has been a beneficial session. I can see we've got a couple of questions in chat, so I will be answering them shortly. But for those of you watching this live and as a recording, thank you very much for your time as always, and I'll catch you in the next one. See you later.